Hey, welcome everybody. So the person that I had on the podcast today was a really rad guy that I met a long time ago, over a year ago, when my band played with him when he was playing with his group, the Apaches. He's a man of many bands. He does tons of different shit. Really great dude, really fiercely intelligent. I met up with him and the drummer of the Apaches for drinks once. And I remember we went on for fucking hours. This guy is really, really intelligent, really well spoken, can really hold down a conversation for a long time. In the beginning, we talk about, we just kind of have an interview about his music. And then about halfway through, it just gets fucking crazy. We start talking about horror movies and just a bunch of shit. Really, really great. Really had a great time. Had a lot of fun. So please enjoy Eric Hirsch of the Apaches / Analog Sun / Parlor Games / a bunch of other shit I've never heard of. What's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks for coming over, man. Thanks for the beer, too.
Thank you.
This is just a full disclaimer to everybody. This is full mic'd for the first time, so hopefully there's no hiccups and my dog will stop whining. So what's up, man? How have you been? I haven't seen you in
Months.
a while.
Yeah.
It's been months. Where did we go to eat?
We grabbed some food and beers at Zips one
Zips.
night.
That's right. Zips in Gilbert?
Yeah,
Is that
I
right?
know in Chandler. Yeah.
Chandler. Gotcha.
It's kind of my the local place just because it's walking distance from my house. I moved to the suburbs. And
Yeah, where are you? I was wondering. Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from like McClintock and Ray, like McClintock
Nice.
Warner. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. We were
sweet.
looking to buy a house, and then we were like, all right, we could either be like right on top of the college or get a little bit further away. And
Yeah.
that was pretty good because it's a good compromise between being like close enough to stuff, but also being, kind of in like a good area, and we have a kid now and stuff, so
There you go. Yeah, so you want to be in an area where people aren't like crazy partying every single night and stuff like that. Not like you were doing when you were younger,
right,
I'm sure.
yeah.
So,
not to, yeah.
So basically, what I want to talk about for sure is like, I want to know about, you're all over the board musically. What was the first instrument that you picked up that you realized that you wanted to make you play music?
I think that's a tough question because I started playing the trumpet like everybody else. Like
Really?
They pick like a school instrument, and that wasn't the one I selected. Yeah, like when we were going to school, you have to pick 3 instruments, and I picked the saxophone I think first or something, and then middle one was the trumpet, and then the last one was drums. And then I think they just gave everybody their middle choice. And I should have been smart enough at 6 years old or whatever to figure that out. But
6 years old? You were in band at 6 years
I
old?
was 6 or 7, right? Like,
Really?
right? Isn't it something like that?
With me, band didn't become a thing until like middle school.
No,
I think because I had the recorder when I was in elementary school.
yeah.
We did, like,
I think
Woody
that we
Guthrie.
had. I think we had. If I can remember, I think we did have a 5th grade or
All
something.
right,
like
that's cool.
that.
That's rad.
Fourth
Okay, so
grade.
and you went to school out
My
in
timeline
Arizona?
might be a little bit off. No, I went to school in New York.
Oh, that's right. You're
Yeah,
from New York, of
Long
course.
Island. Yeah.
Nice. So when did you come out here?
I came out here in 2007, 2008, and came out for college. It wasn't my first college I went to, but decided to to travel across and do school out here, and I went to school for anthropology.
Oh
here.
shit! I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
So you picked up trumpet, and then what? Were you into music? Did you want to be a musician back then? Because I know when I was a kid, like I would just go through my dad's like hair metal CD collection.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
just like, oh, dude,
So-
I want to do this minus the tights.
But like, I actually was just talking about this recently with somebody, but it was a really weird journey. Like when I was a kid, I can't believe I'm gonna say this on
You don't
the
have
radio.
to.
No, but like when I was a kid, I got like super into like when I was really small. I was super into like Glenn Miller and like that jazz, like the big band jazz
that's
music, and that kind of got me into like musicals and stuff like that. And so I was super into like Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, and I actually my parents put me in tap dancing for like, but believe it or not, like, I got me really into music at early age. I was very obsessed with music. And then that sort of changed. Well, I think that initially it was like Michael Jackson. Like I wanted to be Michael Jackson, and like everybody else at that time. And then my parents were like, well, if you want to, be Michael Jackson, you got to learn how to dance and you got to learn how to tap dance. Like, I don't know if that's like the path. I don't think that was the path. Like, like I don't think that every single person that wants to be Michael Jackson has to go to tap school. Anyway, so
maybe, I mean, I don't know. He probably did.
So that didn't really stick for a couple years, and then I wound up doing trumpet, and then at the same time I was taking piano lessons, and was very interested in the piano. And then when I was I think I was in I was in jazz bands, the jazz band in middle school, and I had braces, and at the time my braces came off. I couldn't play any longer. Like my aperture had changed. So we wound up happening at the same time I was learning how to play guitar, and I had a guitar, and my band teacher, he wound up, he felt bad for me because I couldn't play any longer. He wound up coming over to me and like, hey, you want to play guitar in jazz band? And I was like, yes, I absolutely do, but I only have an acoustic guitar. My parents aren't going to buy me an electric guitar. So he wound up saying, oh, don't worry about that. I'll call your folks tonight. So I remember that night I was kind of waiting around for my parents I was kind of like, I knew the call was going to come, and I was kind of like waiting for it. And the call came. My mom talked to Mr. Massaro for a little bit, and then after the phone, it was a really quick phone call, and then my mom's like, yeah, we're going to get your electric guitar tomorrow. So it's like, all right, excellent.
Shit,
so then from that moment forward, I was very interested in the guitar, and that kind of stuck. I was still taking piano lessons, but I was kind of hooked on guitar.
So what did they give you? What was the guitar that you got?
Oh man, it was like it was a Fender Squier. It was like
a
black Squier, and
nice.
it was like one of those like the amp comes with the guitar. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like a 10-watt amp.
Yeah.
And it had like a little like button, and like I can wind up like just like go into like high gain mode.
Yeah. It's not just, it was just high gain.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. At the time I was obsessed with learning like Black Sabbath, like licks and stuff like that, and like Led Zeppelin and things like that. I would just listen to albums a lot, like over and over and over again, and I play by ear. I have an uncle that's a musician, and he always played by ear, and just really like hammered it home for me, where like you try not to look at tabs, try not to learn, like just try to play what you hear, just put on an album, listen to it over and over again. So that's what I did for that's how I got into it.
You play, but with the background in band, are you able to read music, or was it
No, I can read music.
You can read music. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, but you primarily like to learn by ear?
Yeah, I mean, like learning like Hendrix and stuff. Like I don't even think that would help you if you had sheet music
true.
For something like that.
Yeah.
But having a background in music, I wound up doing music for a major for a bit, and doing composition and stuff, and knowing that really helped me kind of get a handle on theory and stuff, and that probably stuck with me then, is was applicable like to like right like the most right now,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So what happens then? Are you trying to form a band? Was it like...
So my first band, I was like 15. I had a Doors cover band.
Nice.
With my brother and my brother's two friends. One of them played drums. The other one played keyboards. My brother played guitar, and I actually sang. I didn't play guitar. I just taught my brother how to play the guitar lines, and then I sang.
There you go.
Because I wanted to be Jim Morrison. So, it was pretty much, we had a Doors cover band at like 15 years old or something. We played the local library.
Dude, yes, there you go.
Yeah.
So, okay, and it's so stupid, like, I just now am getting into the Doors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I had listened to the Doors, and I'd known like a couple of the singles, but I think I remember the first album that I ever sat down to listen to of theirs was a few years ago, and I sat down to listen to Strange Days.
Yeah, that's probably their best album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know if I wanted to like it a lot, and I liked certain songs off it, but then there was other songs where I just like did not know what was going on. I didn't really, and I wasn't in a band yet. I wasn't really like, I'd been in a couple like bullshit bands in the past, but I had never really done it, so I didn't truly get it yet.
Yeah.
And then I'm talking like a month ago, I listened. I was delivering pizzas, and I was listening to. I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna listen." Because when I'm delivering pizzas all day long, I'm just in my car, and that's when I primarily listen to all my music.
Totally.
So I was like, "Fuck it, I have Spotify." And I pulled up their first album.
Yeah.
And it just blew me apart. Like it destroyed my life. Like that. Like,
I wish I was with you,
dude. It was so wonderful. And then literally the next night, I bought it on vinyl.
Yeah.
Like I went to Zia, and I was like, "This is what's gonna happen." And I think the song that made me the song that really blew off the doors for me, like, it was two songs. It was because like Break On Through was like, okay, I've heard this song 1,000 times. And then I heard Soul Kitchen, which is the second song.
Yeah.
Made me just, it was amazing.
Pretty
and
amazing.
Then I think the song that really made me fall in love with them was 20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
Just because that
I remember that.
that chorus
totally.
is so awesome.
Yeah, it is. It totally is. I like that slick little guitar thing in the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah, I remember practicing that like over and over when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like. It's kind of sad though, because I think that like getting into the music and getting into that stuff at like 15, I feel like it's like the equivalent of reading like I don't know, like how they teach Grapes of Wrath or Catcher in the Rye to like 15-year-olds.
It's rudimentary.
You can't. Well, it becomes a thing where you're reading it and you're making your way through it and you're getting it, but you're not processing everything, and you can't apply that to your life. But it winds up like later on, you wind up like having to revisit that stuff again because there's a whole lot that you probably missed at a certain point. You know? And it's kind of sad too, because I listen to that music so much that now I listen to it and it's just kind of like, you know, like for instance, I probably own about 2,000 vinyl records, and I don't have a single Doors album in there. And
really?
The reason is because it's like I've heard it so much.
I get you.
It's like I don't get excited about it, and that's kind of a bummer. You know what I mean?
No, it totally is.
To kind of, you know, and it's just a matter of like, you know, being exposed to it and then, you know, listening to it and like doing it so much to the point where you kind of you still have an appreciation for it, but you're kind of like, I heard of these all the time.
Yeah.
In New York too, it's the same thing. When growing up, it was on the radio, it was the Stones and Led Zeppelin, like so much to the point where like I can really appreciate both of those bands still, but it's like you just get sick of that sound.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That's exactly how I am. And it's not nearly as cool as like the Rolling Stones or the Doors, but that's how I am with Nirvana. Hardcore. Like I love Nirvana, and when I was like 15, I was absolutely in love with them, and I was like, there I am going saying fucking like again. Like it's my biggest thing. But I was obsessed with the Kurt Cobain journals. They released the book of his journals, and I was just this angsty little pestilent kid.
I think everybody was.
I
totally.
loved it.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm older, I every single time it comes on the radio, it's a hard pass.
That's
like
see,
every time.
The problem too is a lot of that stuff gets associated with where you were in that mindset at that time. So you hear it and then immediately like, oh, I'm feeling a little embarrassed right now because I remember exactly what I was like when I was listening to Nirvana and Soundgarden and stuff like that.
Green Day is the same way for me too. I like grew up on Green Day, and my parents loved Green Day. Yeah. And now I don't have any Green Day or Chili Peppers too. Chili Peppers I think was my first real great concert. Yeah. My first concert was Sheryl Crow. Not
right on.
As great.
That's pretty funny.
And I think my parents made up for it the next year by taking me to see Chili Peppers, and Gnarls Barkley was opening. Okay. Back when Crazy was
awesome.
the single.
Yeah,
it was rad, but it was still. It was kind of a bummer because I was so in love with music, and I didn't understand why then. The show kind of bummed me out. But now as a musician who's playing shows all the time, I understand why it bummed me out. It bummed me out because I was in a giant arena, and I was in the back. Yeah. And it wasn't even that
it's like
depersonalized. Was far away.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was so depersonalized, and it was like I was watching a performance that I was not a part of.
Totally.
Now, as someone who plays shows, I love playing on the floor. Yeah. I love playing as close to the audience as possible.
Yeah, and you guys are super like intimate with your fans and stuff like that, and like when you guys are playing.
And and back then I remember almost being as disassociated, kind of like, is music really what I was like 12. I was like, is music really what I want to do with my life? Is this really what I want? Because I saw an arena show. Like, had I seen some crazy show like up close and personal, it would have been totally different.
Yeah, I remember when I was a teenager, I saw Bob Dylan or Paul Simon and things like that, and I worshiped those guys. And being big arena and just looking at them on a TV screen, I'm feeling like, man, this is like, it's like the same thing as like watching it on TV or something. It just doesn't have the same feel. Yeah, it's different than probably when you saw Paul Simon playing in Greenwich Village or something.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
dude,
Like
I'm so
like a
obsessed
total,
with the
completely
Greenwich
different.
Village scene.
Yeah, totally different vibe, right?
Like I
yeah.
love folk music. I love like. Have you seen there's a documentary on Netflix about like about Greenwich Village?
No, I
It
haven't.
was so
Yeah,
I don't know what it's
but
called.
I will.
But it's
now.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's on Netflix. It blew my doors off. It goes through like all of the primary
Yeah.
people that were involved with the Greenwich Village scene. Phil Oakes is my favorite.
Yeah, I
I
love
talk
Phil
about
Oakes.
Phil Oakes a lot.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Phil Oakes
too.
was one of those guys who I always thought I was alone. Like no one really knew who he was. And then
Yeah.
I got a little older and I started talking to other musicians. And eventually I was like, okay, people do know who he is.
Yeah, totally.
But he is one of those people who flies under the radar because he's not a Dylan.
Yeah, he kind of is overshadowed. Like Dylan overshadowed a lot of those other guys. I love Phil Oakes though.
Yeah, Phil Oakes.
I think like Leonard Cohen recently passed away, and I had that was a huge pivotal musician and poet and writer for me early on in my early 20s. I was obsessed with him. I was everything that I had to have everything that he had he produced.
Now, and I don't know a whole lot about, like, I know his music, but I don't know. For some reason, I'm always like not obsessed, but I have a problem with like stigmas. Like I'm always wondering like, what's the album that has the stigma, or what's the like. So, for instance, with Leonard Cohen, I like his early stuff, but I'm in love with Various Positions. Is that what it's called? I love that album, but that has the giant single Hallelujah.
Totally does.
Is that the album where people pass over? And it's also super different.
I mean, I'm a little different though, like in terms of what I like of Leonard Cohen, because I like the early stuff. The same, like I like pretty much like Songs from the Room and Songs of Love and Hate, and you know, like all the early stuff. I like that a little bit more. His voice is a little softer. It's not as produced. I think that right in the middle of the 70s, he just started getting. I think that what wound up happening was, just like all the other singer-songwriters, by the mid 70s, there's this kind of thing where, like Pink Floyd and these other bands are starting to become more popular in America, right? Like, kind of like those bands, like prog rock and stuff was always kind of big in Europe, and at the same time it was like the opposite in America. You had like James Taylor, Carole King and stuff, Leonard Cohen. And then in the mid 70s, punk music, like all this stuff started kind of coming out, and everything had to be kind of a little bit more gritty, and like the production value got a little bit crazy. And Phil Spector, I think, got a hold of Leonard Cohen and started producing some of his albums, and that was like, to me, it's just like his voice is different. I just lose the feel of it being like, all right, this is like he was a novelist before he was a songwriter.
Yeah.
So it loses that feel for me. Like it becomes more of like, all right, this is like, this is like a bigger person.
I have a very, and I'm sure a lot of people do, complicated relationship with how I feel about Phil Spector. Not just because he's a terrible human being, but because of because I love the works that I love the black girl groups of the 60s. I love the Ronettes and the Crystals and all that stuff. I'm so obsessed with the Wall of Sound and all of that stuff that happened in the 60s. Yeah. But I don't like what he did to musicians who I liked beforehand.
Yeah, totally.
Like his album for the Ramones is ridiculous. The Song of the Century or something. I don't remember the name. For some reason, I cannot believe I hate myself for this. I cannot remember the name of the album that he did with them. But it's got like I Remember Rock and Roll Radio and all these huge like songs with brass behind them.
Yeah,
and, this is the Ramones.
Well, it's kind of like Phil Spector kind of, he came at a point too, where at least this is my understanding of how I put it into perspective. But he was to music as Stanley Kubrick is to directing. Yeah. Like for Stanley Kubrick, he comes from like that line of directors where the director is more important than the actors that you're watching and the performance. It's like more important than that, and has more control and really like just tools for the production. Where and Phil Spector had a very similar thing. He would lock the musicians out of the studio when he was mixing and mastering and hiring other guys to do things. It was like that sort of thing. So it kind of becomes like this very like singular view of what this music should sound like outside of what the artist like even thought that it should sound like.
Yeah, everything becomes their vision.
Yeah, exactly.
I totally understand. I love Stanley
And it's not
Kubrick.
a knock on. I think that
No.
great things came from that. I think Stanley Kubrick's one of my favorite directors. It just winds up being like it's just a different product is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Stephen King, I mean, famously can't stand the Shining that Stanley Kubrick made, which I understand. But having read The Shining multiple times and seeing the movie multiple times, I prefer the Stanley Kubrick version of the story
me too.
way more because he doesn't have a
100%.
cocaine mallet.
It's yeah,
Like,
right,
it's
yeah,
not
yeah. So
scary.
it makes sense. Yeah, totally. No, I think I'd take. I mean, Stanley Kubrick's got to be my favorite director, but it's like and same thing. I think that his vision's great. I just think that sometimes it works in that case, and then other times with like Phil Spector, there's some misses because it's just like the singular view of what's going on.
Exactly. You have to be able to collaborate with any kind of
Yeah.
art. Unless you are doing it all by yourself and you're
Yeah.
sitting in a room and you have no outside help, then that's fine. But
Yeah.
especially if you're a producer, I mean, I guess if he was writing a lot of the songs, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
if he's just being a producer and telling people
You
what
got
to
like
do.
Alan Parsons Project is like
Yeah.
another good example. That's another one where it's the Alan Parsons Project. He's the producer.
Yeah.
Like Eric Wolfson was the songwriter, and a lot of times they just had these other singers come in, and it has this very like kind of like each song is very different. And then eventually they were like, he let Eric sing one of the songs, and that became a hit. And then it was like, well, we're not gonna let you sing too many because then it won't be my project anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
no, definitely.
so it's like, even though that probably would have been a pretty good decision, and maybe like if it was just like kind of like a band, you know, you have that like a kind of a more democratic view, you know.
And a lot of that, and the dumbest thing is a lot of it is not to benefit the art. A lot of it's ego. So you have people like one of my classic, like being in a band, I always have to have, like, we always have to be able to compromise, and for the most part we do because we're friends as well as people who work together in music. But one of the things that I always remember is I'm a giant horror nerd and I'm a giant Friday the 13th freak. Like, I can spit crazy Friday the 13th trivia that I really am almost embarrassed to have. But the crazy thing is that on the first one, there is literally no way that you could have known that it was Jason's mother who was killing people.
No way.
No way at all.
Totally.
You had no
don't guess
idea
that.
when
Yeah,
Betsy Palmer came out. There's no reason that you should have known
Big
it was her.
twist. Yeah.
But it was a twist. But it was a twist. Even at least M. Night Shyamalan gives you clues. Where at the end you can piece together these clues.
Yeah.
Whereas in Friday the 13th, when you see her, there is no factor. You're just like, who is this old lady?
Yeah,
This doesn't make any sense.
especially because the Jason. See, it's very hard. I think like I couldn't imagine. I didn't watch it when it first came out. I was too young. So like I can't like it's really hard to look at that series because you have such an idea of like Jason with the mask. He doesn't even get that till the third movie.
The third one, exactly.
Like so it is really weird looking, like watching it. You're like the whole entire movie. You're like, oh, that's Jason because you know Jason.
Yeah.
But then you're like, no, it never was Jason.
Yeah.
Right? That's a weird thing.
Yeah, no, it totally
It's like
is.
it's like multi-dimensional.
Yeah.
You know?
And the lesson to take from it is I think it's one of the documentaries. I don't remember which one. There's a part where I think it's Betsy Palmer was recalling a story where Sean S. Cunningham was given, the director was given the opportunity to, hey, like let's at least put my character in a diner or something in the background. At least put me somewhere so when people see me, I'm not a stranger.
Totally.
And he's like, no.
He's like, absolutely not.
So, and in hindsight, it's stupid. Like, but that's why it's really important to listen to the people who you're working with, because especially if when you're a director or a songwriter, your head is so involved in the project that it's hard for you to see cool ideas on the other side.
Yeah.
So, like, I like to step back sometimes from something that I'm working on and come back later on, because then I'll have a clearer head, or I'll have some outside ideas, and you don't put yourself in a box on purpose, but it just kind of happens that way.
Right. Yeah.
So to go back, so first band, you were doing Doors stuff.
Yeah, it's like. Yeah.
And then when did you? And were you still experimenting with other kinds of instruments, or were you just mainly singing the guitar?
Mostly the guitar, and it was guitar and piano at that point. yeah, and then pretty much went to college. I went into high school, like just like jammed or whatever. Like, mostly did like solo stuff and like acoustic guitar stuff, and then in college I got embarrassingly enough, I got into like the jam band scene, and I think it's because they knew how to play their instruments. Like at that time in the late '90s, early 2000s, it was like, well, there's not a lot of musicians that like are playing like happy music or like music that's not super depressing, but also know how to play their instruments. So I got into that whole thing, and right around that time, I met Adam Gold, who plays drums in Apaches.
How old were you at this point?
I think we met each other when I was 20.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and he was into the same stuff. We were both into jazz and stuff, so we were trying to incorporate that sort of thing. And we had pretty much like a weird psychedelic jam band, and we were a house band at this bar called Painters and on Long Island, and we'd play nights and like stuff, but Long Island really just had like a cover music scene, like a cover band scene. There was really no like way to get to do anything. You'd have to go to the city, and we really didn't do that much. So yeah, so then and taking it all the way back, like I wound up moving out here and then playing with a bunch of dudes, never really having like a solid project, like mostly just Adam and I would be recording. Like I'd record stuff whenever I'd go back home. And then eventually, I started working on a solo album. It was our project called Parlor Games. And what I wound up doing is I could do keys and bass and guitar and vocals, but I can't play drums. I just never been able to. So I wound up sending him the music, and then he wound up laying down drums. And then we'd go back and forth, and it would be this long process of like trying to get the levels right, or like, all right, I'd be up on the phone late at night with him and be like, all right, I think that's cool, but can we do something different with the hi-hat part or this thing and that thing? And then we pretty much put together a whole album of that stuff. And yeah, so Adam and I probably together, like just the two of us, have like 2 or 3 albums of music. Like, that's awesome. For psychedelic, it's mostly psychedelic, like 60s sounding, like music. And that actually spawned the Apaches because I actually had an idea. I was like, a lot of the music that we were doing was like, we'd have like this weird country song. It was kind of like the Beatles' White Album, like a country song. We'd have kind of this weird jazzy song. We'd have this thing and that thing. It was kind of all over the place, kind of like Ween or something. Just whatever we felt like writing. And I'd always write like in all different types of genres, so I could never pick what I wanted to really do. But one of the songs I wanted to do was like a surf song. So I was like, all right, let's just figure out what surf's all about. Because I didn't like grow up listening to surf rock or anything like that. And so we were like listening to stuff, and I started writing stuff. And then I was like, oh man, I'm like writing like 1 song like that, like 2 songs like that, like 3. And then we're like, hey, you know what we could do? We could probably just put together a band and make some money. Like maybe we could play like restaurants, or like we can actually fuel the Parlor Games project with that. So we did. We got Sully and Jack. And with that in mind, it was like, we're not going to be anything more than just like a surf band and just, like gigging around and trying to actually make money off of it. And then it wound up being like more popular and like more interesting than the stuff we were trying to fuel. So we haven't really touched the Parlor Game stuff in a long time. We've just been doing Apaches, and kind of like I started writing more stuff outside of that like outside of just a straight surf genre. Like I would say our first album is like very surf. Like there's a little bit of psychedelic, a little bit of prog, like a little bit of that touches of that stuff, a little bit of flamenco style stuff. But like we're recording our second album in March, and we're like shopping around for studios right now and doing going through like jumping through all the loops with that stuff. But we're this next album is going to be a lot more like experimental. There's a lot more songs that kind of touch into different genres and stuff.
Cool. Then that's really cool, because last time that we spoke and we talked about the Apaches, which is the band that I first saw him in, we played a show at Rebel Lounge with Paper Foxes, right?
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Like I met like 2 bands that night that I like held on to forever.
Yeah, and then we got you guys doing the album release too.
Yeah,
the same bands, because I was like, I love these bands.
Yeah. So, which is so cool. And now Paper Foxes is on our album release show, which is going to be in March, which is super exciting. Yeah. I cannot wait to see them and have them again, because their new EP is amazing. But So last time we spoke, I remember having an interesting conversation about what you kind of touched on briefly, which is that the Apaches is a genre band. It's not really going to go outside of being a genre band, and I think it's interesting now that you are going to experiment with that.
Yeah,
What's happening?
Well, I think that what wound up happening is that I just keep on writing more and more songs that are in that vein, but are now it's kind of going outside of that. Like we have one song called Wild Nile that's much more experimental. It's longer. It's probably about like 7 or 8 minutes long.
Okay.
And it's got a jam part in the middle. Maybe it's a little bit closer to what I was doing with Adam a while ago. And it's got this Middle Eastern flavor to it that's really works really well. Cool. And it wasn't really planned like that. It just kind of started to happen like that. We have this other one called Starlight Drive that's got this dreamy, very psychedelic, early Floyd sound to it too. It all still kind of works together though. Like, still sounds like the Apaches.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
I love the Apaches. I think it's super fun. And so you said you weren't into surf music before this happened?
I mean, of course I've heard stuff.
It's really, really dead on. But that's why I'm so
well,
like.
I think that's kind of my thing. Like for a long time, for a long time, like when I was writing those, like when I was working early on with Adam, I was writing like a country song, and like I'd nail it, like with those different genres. I'd nail like those different things. I'd find that vocabulary, you know, and then I'd explore it and like put it like just doing it. It just comes from listening to a lot of different music. Mm-hmm. But I mean, of course, I'd heard like Dick Dale and stuff, but I really didn't get like deep into it until we started making the idea of like, let's do the Apaches, let's have a surf band. And it kind of makes sense in Arizona because you're like, you know, you're walking around and you're like it feels like when you're in Tempe and Phoenix that you're like, it's sunny all the time, so it's always summer, so you're not gonna feel like, you know, like we were like, we could play all the time, like in New York and it's snow outside, nobody wants to listen to surf rock. But I mean, like you can get to like a thing where you feel like you're like driving around. I had a cousin that was visiting and she was like, it feels like the beach is just like over there. Yeah. Like it's just like, it just keeps on feeling like it's like over there, you know? Yeah. So we're, and now we're kind of interested in creating this thing that's like Southwestern surf. That's like, it's spaghetti Western music. It's mariachi music. It's flamenco. It's all these things nestled into surf music, so it kind of has this desert feel to it. That's so cool. So eventually you're just gonna make a full circle back into making parlor games music. Well, like, I don't know about that. I mean, we're like, we're kind of, I'm all over the place at this point. Like, so the thing that so this is what I want to spend a little bit of time on, because I was driving around again delivering pizzas in Old Town Scottsdale, and I'm driving around, and you posted Analog Sun onto Spotify, and we're going to jump backwards a little bit in a minute, but I remember driving around and listening to it and getting so stoked and getting so fucking excited, because it's the kind of shit that I've always been listening to. I love synthwave. Yeah. I love old analog sounding synth stuff, and the fact that you were able to make that so great but also unique and melodic, like you are more, I mean, you're more vocal with the instruments than a lot of the really repetitive kind of soundtracky stuff. It's different, yeah. So I remember driving around listening to it and just thinking to myself, I want to talk to this guy about this, but because I'm such a fucking opportunist and I'm just trying to be so industrious all the time. Yeah. I was just thinking, but I can't just talk to him. I need to do a podcast. Like, I need to get it out there, because not everyone is going to want to talk to him about this in the way that I want to talk to him about it. So I have to do it. And that was months ago. Yeah. And then eventually I was just like, fuck it, I'm going to do it. So I want to know, where did the idea of Analog Sun come from? God, this fucking dog. Where did the idea of Analog Sun come from, and how did you first get it started, get it rolling? All right, so I've always been interested in synthesizers. I think it like started with prog rock and like listening to a lot of like Genesis and stuff, and getting like, whoa, I just love the sound of synthesizers, because it's something that your ears just aren't used to listening to. Like, you can play one type of song on the piano or another type of song on the piano, like totally opposite spectrum. It's still gonna sound like a piano. Mm-hmm. Like, synthesizer can sound like anything. So you can play the same thing. Always been interested in it, but in two different settings. It sounds like a completely different song. Yeah, totally. And you can manipulate it in real time. There was just something like that. I just always was appealed to me, and I hadn't had the opportunity to do anything with it. But my wife gave birth in October last year, and I knew that I was like, all right, I'm not going to be able to like be going out all the time and gigging, and I'm not going to be able to have people over with drum sets and be doing that stuff. I need some project where I'm going to be able to just go in the room late at night while the baby's sleeping and put on headphones and work on the whole entire thing by myself. And
Is that hard? Like the idea of like the transition?
I mean, yeah, I think I'm still kind of struggling with it in a way because I'm so used to, especially drums. Drums on a drum machine are like, I feel like they're very restrictive. Like it's just, I'm still trying to work through that and make that more fluid, like, you know, in a way, or more organic. But, so then I got really into it because for me, like songwriting is all about process. Like depending on what what genre you're gonna write, it's all about the process that you're gonna do. And so I found my process with the synthwave stuff, and I wound up treating it more like sonic painting. Like I did it the same way that I would do when I used to paint for a bit, and I was doing color fields, and I do layers.
Jesus fucking Christ! Is there anything else that you have you done not done anything?
I can say I was a great painter, but I would do like layers, and I'd start with a layer and then do another layer, and it kind of was like this organic, like kind of like through composed type of thing where it wasn't like Beatles, like verse, chorus, verse. Like that's how I would write Apaches music would be. You know, I'd come up with the whole line and the bass line, and I know when we were switching and everything, and we'd have all right, we need a C section here, and all those other types of things. But with this stuff, I would seriously sit and make bunch of patterns on the drum machine. That would be one night, or like all sorts of different things, or several nights. And then I'd sit and I'd listen to the drum beats, and I'd play like a bass pattern on the synth, and then once I was like, all right, I feel like I like that, or I like that where that's going, I'd lay that down on top of that, and then I'd wind up doing the next layer of like chords, and then a melody line on top of that. I would just kind of stack them. And like I never go back. Like I had all these rules for this project. Like every song had to be within a certain time frame. Like I couldn't be long. Like too long. I couldn't be too short. And I wouldn't go backwards. Like if I laid something down, I'd keep it. Like I had all these different rules that I came up with in my mind. And I just kind of be like, all right, what am I imagining? And then I'd come out with the next. Like I'd kind of try to emulate that feeling in the music. Like I'd be like just like weird stuff, just like you know, like dark forces patrol the border or something. Like I'd have like lines written out, and then I'd be like, all right, what does that look like in my head? And I'd have like these mechanical sounds or these things going on, and and I'd use that, and then I just wind up putting together this piece. And I really wanted to focus on sci-fi, like a sci-fi theme, you know?
For sure.
So
there's no other way. I mean, there are, but like that's the best way. So what how's the gear? How did you accumulate the gear?
So all right. So the first thing I got was and a lot of times the gear writes the music for you.
Oh,
like in a way, it's not like, and I don't mean that in a way that like it's sequenced, like you push the button and it sequences and because I actually, one of my rules was that I wouldn't do any arpeggiators. Like I didn't use any arpeggiators. Like if I was playing and the line was I played that. And I played that all the way through for the 3 minutes, which was frustrating. But I did it for a good reason, because if you have it sequenced, it's the same wave every single time. And what I wanted to do was I wanted it to have this like organic quality where it kind of shifted a little bit, like it was, which would normally be like a mistake, like it shifted a tiny bit, but it just created this like feeling like you're listening to like a live synth, you know what I mean?
Totally.
So that was one of the things. But what I mean is like it's like when you find the right sound, it just has this envelope and this feeling that you're like, oh man, like that I know what chords I want to play, you know, like it just happens. But I got a.
The time when I get a new guitar. Anytime I get a new guitar, I write something on it immediately.
There you go, right? Yeah. So I got the Roland Alpha Juno 2 was the first synth I got, and I fell in love with it immediately. I think if mine broke, I'd buy one immediately the next day, like for whatever the cost was. It's an amazing synthesizer. A lot of stuff is like buried in menus, so you have to have it wired to like a MIDI controller with knobs so that you can manipulate all the parameters underneath. But I used that one for the majority of Rise of Analog Sun. I also used a Yamaha Reface Dx which is kind of like the DX7, which has got like really great bell tones, and it's like FM synthesis, which is a little bit different. So you could do have a much different sound, and it's really bright, and it's really great for like a lead type of thing. And then another thing that I did was I used organic bass lines. Like I used a Hofner, like the Paul McCartney bass, pretty much.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Like a
Okay,
hollow body.
cool.
Like it's got that hollow body. It's really wood sounding. I ran it into there, and all the bass lines on the album are done with that. And I feel like I was trying to go for like the band Air or something, like where it had this kind of this really electronic sound, but it had this organic thing underneath it somehow, where it's kind of halfway in between. Because you kind of hit the nail on the head. I didn't really want to make I feel like a lot of people approach electronic music from like a DJ mindset, where it's like samples, they're triggering things. They're like they'll kick in, they'll do drums, and then they'll kick in a couple of things, and then they'll subtract something and then bring it back in. I wanted it to be a little bit different than that.
Yeah, no, and that's really, really cool, because there's plenty of analog. Like, okay, so I love like some of the bands or artists that I really like with that kind of music. There's like Laserhawk and Clusterbuster
that's one of my favorites
and
too.
Perturbator and
Yeah.
all this really cool stuff. But and it's great, and some of it does have leads.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, it's just really cool soundtrack kind of music.
Yeah.
Or like some kind of like
It's kinda like
gothic
halfway
orgy kind of music.
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of like in between, like being like a background. It's like kind of like a soundtrack for your life, like whatever. If you're driving, if you're hanging out, or And I like that. And I appreciate it. Of course, I listen to all that. I was trying to make like have like a melody on top. You know what I mean? Like make it more like a song. You know?
When we first talked a while ago, I said that Cherry Racer was my favorite song, and now that's definitely, I feel like, probably one of the more poppy, like melodic songs on the album.
Yeah.
But as I listened to it more that night, that when I was driving around, the song that really kicked my ass was Ghosts.
Oh, really?
Jesus Christ, that song is so good.
I'm glad, because I feel like some of those I feel like when I listen to that album, like that's like in my mind one of the weaker ones. But I'm glad that you like that. Yeah, just because it's very that one is repetitious, but I always hoping that there wasn't too much of that going on.
Definitely
I like
isn't, because they're not that long, like you said. That song is just so eerie and unsettling.
There is definitely that going on. Yeah,
I love it.
So the way that I program the album is that like it kind of has this like intergalactic like space thing with like that first the first song kind of sounds like you're like taking off in a rocket ship or something. And then Cherry Racer's like this like fast, like there's a lot of faster, like almost like racing songs type of thing in the beginning. Moon Run is very like intense, you know.
It's shaped. That's what I was gonna say. It's shaped in the beginning. It's very different. It's a completely different album.
And then it starts to get dark, and then you have pretty much it's Dark Planet. I think that starts to get really, really kind of like horror, like this unsettling vibe. You know what I mean? It kind of ends with Air Castles, which is kind of in between both of those worlds.
I love it. Because that's what really I listened to. Because I think when I first heard the album, I don't know if I listened to it all the way through. I think I heard the first few songs, got super stoked, and then got sidetracked. Whereas this time I sat down and I listened to the entire thing, and it was
I appreciate that. You're probably the only one.
It very much kind of like out of nowhere took this turn of like, oh wow, I'm really into this again. Like I loved it in the beginning, and then like there's a couple songs in the middle that are great, and then out of nowhere I found myself going from listening to it in the background to it being at the forefront of my mind. And that's right around Dark Planet, Ghost. Like that's love awesome. that part of the album. Now, is that all like are you inspired there from, like, I know that you're a big film guy, so it's like John Carpenter and stuff like that?
Of course. John Carpenter's huge for me, and listen to that stuff still all the time, and I love his newest albums. I love that he just embraced that and was just like, I'm gonna release albums and tour. I'm so upset I missed that show. It was right around my birthday. I should have done it. Did you go?
Yeah. No, I didn't go. I wanted to go.
We should have went together.
I know we should. We both
when he comes
gone.
back. Releases Lost
alive.
Themes 3. Yeah, we'll go.
I wanted to go.
He looks like the Crypt Keeper now.
I know. do you know? But he's still sharp as shit, and he's still got a biting,
brilliant,
really great sense of
it's
humor.
amazing to think of how much he's contributed to what like pulp movies are, or what we think of the modern horror and sci-fi genre. Like that, like it all came from that guy's brain. And to think that he pretty much invented synthwave, you know?
Yeah, I know. He's the best. So And he does his own soundtracks, which is rare and awesome. I know Robert Rodriguez does that too, but those are two completely separate things. I wanted to go really bad. I don't know if you know Early Tongue.
I don't.
He DJ, I think his name's Adam Lovelady, I think is his name. I'm not 100% sure. But he was there. He does electronic music, but I saw him perform. He put a bunch of pedals and I'm not a gearhead at all. I'm totally lost. Like I rely on Josh for the singer to do all that shit. Like I don't know anything. I'm
like,
really
what
bad
should
about
I use?
it.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm very much, which is lucky I'm a bass player. I'm very much like plug and play. I'm super obsessed about my tone.
Yeah.
So I'll spend forever like in between every song at practice. I'm raising a knob or changing something. Right now it's about perfect because I found the right strings.
Yeah.
I think the string has contributed a lot to me not liking the tone as much.
Yeah.
Now I'm using DR high beams because they're one of the longest lasting bright strings.
Oh, nice.
They
just stay bright longer?
Yeah, they stay bright longer. And I need that brightness.
I should tell Sully.
They're a little bit longer. They're a little bit more expensive.
Yeah.
But totally worth it because I was using Super Slinkies forever. And those are fine, but they're very much just the standard. So I wanted to kind of go out of my comfort zone a little bit without buying like $40, $50 elixirs. I wanted to get something kind of in between.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I don't know gear really at all. Which is crazy of the fact that I don't know how to remember all those numbers and shit. Like you've got like when you're talking about the Rolands and the different things. Like I
just started God bless my wife because she's let me pick up all this stuff.
Yeah.
But I've just been like scouring like the internet, reading articles and trying out different things. And then I have a pretty decent synth collection now. And yeah, I'm planning on doing this next Analog Sound album. I have a great idea for it, and I plan on it'll be more dynamic because there'll be a lot more different tones and different things going on.
When is that? Are you working on that right now?
Well, Apaches are recording in March. Probably the album will be released in late April, May, and then I'm gonna get right to work on the Analog Sun stuff. I've been kind of like going back and forth now. Like now I'm kind of like on a cycle because I'm pretty committed to the Analog Sun stuff and the Apaches.
That's awesome.
I want to call the next album the Chemosphere. Like you might, I don't know if you know this movie, but it was a movie that came out in the 80s, a Brian De Palma film, and it's called Body Double.
I don't know.
Well, you have to watch it.
I know Brian De Palma.
It's amazing. But one of the main, like, it's almost like its own character in the film is this building, and it looks like this weird LA spaceship, but it's like on the side of the mountain.
Okay,
but it's like
cool.
a building that looks like super mid-century modern. There's a long history, but I wound up falling in love with that building, and I wound up like reading all about it and everything. And I kind of want to do an album that has something to do with that building. I want to call it that. I want to have something on the front of the album with that. And there's a really interesting history with it. The album, the building itself was like it's on a side of a hill, and it was this property that couldn't be built upon. Like nobody could figure out how to build upon it. This guy John Lautner came with an idea and was like, "Hey, I got a really great idea on how to build this," and he pretty much built like this like saucer-shaped house on like a pole, like a giant structure, and then had this tram that went up the side up into the house. And so the guy that was on the land was like, I can't afford that. And then DuPont, the chemical company, was like, we got some experimental paints and stuff. If you use those paints, we'll partly fund it. So it has this whole history, and that's why they call it the Chemosphere. So what wound up happening is this guy owned it. He wound up selling it to a doctor. This doctor actually owned it into the late 60s and actually got murdered in the house by home invasion, right? Like two guys during a home invasion type of thing.
That's crazy.
And then it was sold to various celebrities in the Hollywood area. And then it became, in the 80s, it just became this party house where people would rent it on the weekends and just throw these crazy drug-fueled orgy, crazy. Yeah, and it just got this like history that I fell in love with the house. So I was like, man, I can make an album that has all those dynamic
you're gonna build a soundtrack
pieces.
to the life.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
So cool. Holy shit.
So I think that's just one of the ideas I'm tossing out for this next album.
That's so cool. Like what the hardest thing, and I don't know why I didn't anticipate this being the hardest thing of making an album, was because this is the first time, because the first album that my band Phantom Party did was just an EP. We put the same mic that I recorded the first 2 podcasts with in front of each instrument, multi-tracked
Totally.
it like that. Just super simple, but it was a good mic, we mixed it all on Audacity. There was no mixing really.
Yeah,
it was super simple, just volumes. Maybe a little bit of reverb. So a lot of reverb. So that was basically so with this one though, we had a real interface, we had drum mics, we had vocal mics, we had enough stuff. We did it all ourselves in a house.
Yeah.
And I anticipated the hardest part to be the recording process or figuring out how to set things up. Figuring out how to set things up was definitely one of the hardest things.
Yeah, yeah.
But the most anxiety-filled, hard, really truly frustrating parts was the mixing and mastering.
Yeah.
Which we're still in the middle of.
That one, it's because it moves on you. Like, you get it and you listen to it, and then you're like, there's a couple things that go into that, because I have a long history with that stuff and being super frustrated by that. So, mastering, send it out to get mastered is what I think. Yeah, send it out, because I don't even mess with that anymore. That to me is like, there's like 1 out of every 100,000 people that can probably have an ear for that sort of thing. It's like the smallest minute changes. I send that out. Mixing is so tricky though. You wind up getting into mixing and you wind up going, we used to print off CDs and give it to all the band members and go listen to it on every stereo you can find. And we would do that, and we'd be like, the bass is loud on this one stereo, and the bass is fine on this thing, and all these other. Yeah. It just could never get it. We constantly were just trying to find this middle ground. And yeah, I don't know. I never feel happy with that.
It's really hard because I have my car stereo. It's sounding good. It always sounds amazing through headphones.
Yeah, there you go.
No matter what headphones.
Well, that's the tough thing. If you're mixing with headphones,
which is what we're doing.
Bad idea. I wouldn't do that. I would have some sort of studio monitors or something else, because you don't get the same frequencies for bass and for treble doing that on the headphones. Although here's the thing is that I could be wrong, because most people just listen to MP3 on headphones. So no one's listened to it on a hi-fi system anymore.
Yeah. So, I do, but I'm one of the only, probably we're one of the only people who do. But that was the thing with the album, is I'll hear it on headphones, I think it sounds great, and then I'll listen to it on my speakers, and it's just where's all this mid coming from? Why is this? This doesn't make any sense. And the hardest thing for me, because I'm such an anxious personality to begin with, that whenever Josh is like, okay, I'm about to put up a new file, I'm like, oh shit. Okay. All right, now I have to prepare myself emotionally. Yeah,
totally. I know, man.
It's so nerve wracking. And we're he's mastering it and mixing it himself. So far, the songs that are mastered and mixed sound great. But it's just, I'm just whatever you did with that one, just do that again 11 more times. And
it never works. It's you can't really just apply that like a stamp.
Yeah, I know.
It's so hard.
It's really, really hard. That part has been ridiculously hard. Because we didn't do that the first time.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us expected it to be as hard this time around when we actually have all of the right equipment.
Totally.
But it's still fun. I'm definitely happy with it so far, but we'll see how it goes. Now, do you have to do that kind of stuff with the analogs?
Yeah. So Analog Sun, different than it's a different process than the Apaches, because the coolest thing about Analog Sun is plug right in, like the synth goes right into a mixer, right into the. I was actually recording to an 8-track for the Analog Sun stuff. I'm gonna do a different process this time. I'll record into the computer, because I really hated running out of tracks. I want more tracks. So but I would go into the 8-track, and then the thing with the 8-track is that I was super limited too, because you have 8 tracks, but I have more tracks than that on there. What I would have to do is then bounce the 8 tracks down. I have 6 tracks. I have 2 available tracks open. I bounce all 6 tracks down to 2 tracks, and then I fill up those 6, and then I bounce those down to the next 2, and then so I wound up being able to use the 8-track for more than that many. The only problem is that you get locked into what you previously did. So when you add something, you can't change the levels of all the previous 6 things that you did.
Gotcha.
So what we wound up doing is what I wound up doing is switching over to the digital stuff now. So I'll wind up doing that for this next album so I could manipulate everything independently.
Gotcha.
But then I wound up mixing it the best that I can, and I sent it to a master. I've been using the same master now for like the last like 6 or 7 albums that I've worked on.
Wow.
Yeah, and actually I sent it to him, and he goes, dude, you gotta he sent it back to me. I was like, oh, this doesn't sound like great. I was like, what's up? He's like, dude, you gotta remix that stuff. So I actually had to pay again and like remix that stuff, because the first pass of Analog Sun, I had levels to like the roof, like pretty much it wasn't clipping, but it was like all the way up. It was like at the top. And what wound up happening is that he had like no wiggle room to work with it.
Gotcha.
So I wound up having to redo that, which was worth it because I got better recordings out of that.
And
and now I know, you know.
Yeah, that's
so it's still a struggle.
The hardest part with us is that we're all such giant control freaks, and we are obsessive over like having to be in control of every single detail. We like Josh can't sleep at night. I can't sleep at night. Austin doesn't give a fuck. Like Austin, I mean, that's not true. Austin, it's not that he doesn't care about it. He's amazing, but Austin is so just easygoing and laid back, and all he wants to do is play music. He doesn't like. Every once in a while, he'll be like, "Hey, can you turn my kick up, or can you turn the snare up?" But for the most part, he's so passive that he just like he's cool. So it's always just like me and Josh and mom and daddy fighting about like
totally
this and that, this and the other thing. So
it's good for the mastering to let go a little bit, is my opinion, because they're gonna have a fresh set of ears. A lot of times you get like just like your ears get dead after a while listening to the same song over and over again anyway. Like that's the thing that like most people don't realize, and you probably feel the same way, is that like after recording and doing it like so much that after playing X amount of shows playing the same song, you're like, I don't even want to listen to that song anymore.
No,
I don't even know what was good, what I liked about this one to begin with.
We played so many shows in our first year that by the end of it, we were totally bored. We felt like a relationship who'd been together for a year who was like perusing a sex shop. Like, do we need a swing? Do we need,
what do we need to get
beads?
this stuff
what
going?
What do we need to get this? Yeah. So that was the problem. But after a while, we went back to the drawing board and came up with new songs.
Yeah.
And like, it's so funny how one new song on a set list will make the whole night funner.
Oh, totally.
Whole set
as long as you have just like a new song. Yeah, totally.
It's so fun.
And then you're like, we still got it.
Yeah,
totally.
So that's super fun, and like it's also scary. Like with you, it's cool because you're able to jump around in these different projects and do all these different things. With us, it's like we want to use all of the three of us in the same name, but like the second album that we're planning on doing is like totally different than what we're doing right now. It's not really going to be surf at all.
Yeah.
So it's very much like, I don't know, like at the end of the day, all we can do is not give a shit and just do whatever we want to do.
That's probably the best course of action, I think.
Yeah. That's what we're going to do. I mean, we're not going to like eliminate anything. We're just stay us, and it's still going to have melodies and things that are going to be the same kind of vibe, and Josh's voice will be the same, and we're playing the instruments the same way, just without the surf like leads and stuff like that.
Totally.
Definitely in a more Doors kind of like way, but with more rock.
Yeah.
Which is gonna be fun.
I'm excited for that.
That's gonna be really fun.
Yeah.
But so Parlor Games, Apaches, Analog Sun.
Yeah.
What other projects are there that I'm? There's the only 3 that I know of.
That's it.
Is that it?
Yeah. I mean, and the Parlor Game stuff. It's like we've started recording a new album, and then midway through that album, we started doing Apaches, and that has kind of been on the shelf.
Gotcha.
Maybe we'll release that as an EP or something at some point. But like Adam and I had released previous stuff, and because I'm playing bass and playing keys, and like we could never do it live.
Yeah.
So so we just never could sell albums or anything like that either. So
that makes
it wound
sense.
up being like it's kind of our project, but at the same time like these other things make more sense, and that's kind of a struggle too with the Analog Sun stuff, is I don't know how I would do that live. I'm trying to start a synthwave band like right now.
Yeah.
That's going to be able to do that live. Like we'll have real drums and multiple synth players.
That's awesome. So what I totally forgot what I was going to say. So what's your thoughts on like vinyl? Do you have vinyl? Yeah. You do, right? Apaches has vinyl.
Well, no. We don't have vinyl. I would like I thought you were asking me personally if I own vinyl.
Yeah.
But no, I would love to have vinyl. We don't have money for vinyl.
That's the thing.
Like it costs a lot of money. It's a lot of time too. Like I've talked to friends that have bands that have done vinyl, and you gotta like plan that out for like 5 months because you need to send. They need to like create the, I don't. They need to like create like physical things to make the vinyl.
Yeah.
It's just a long,
That plus
expensive project.
Shouldn't you probably remaster for vinyl too?
Yeah, they have to because it's gonna be a
Yeah.
different sound range, and it just to me, I see it like I would love to. I would do it in a heartbeat. I do it over. We did CDs. Nobody listens to CDs anymore.
No, we're getting
and
CDs
people
too.
buy albums though now, so it's kind of like it makes sense to do it. It's just that initial cost, like that hurdle for that initial
I know.
cost.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna hit up some like releasing some like little labels and releasing labels and do a co-op thing. Like,
Yeah.
so, like we're gonna talk to some people because our friends have done that, and they were talking about how like they paid half, the label paid half,
Right.
the label kept half, they kept half, kind of a deal. You're still
Yeah.
paying like $700, but it's at the end of the day, it's kind of worth it because that's what everybody wants.
Totally, yeah. Well, let me know when
Yeah,
when that happens.
that's the thing. I'm gonna talk to the band that I'm talking to about it,
And then
be
pass
like,
the
send
information out to me.
everything.
Yeah.
Like, dude, give me
Because
your exact steps.
$700, I'd be really interested in that.
Yeah, ish, something like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, I really, really want to do that. I think, I don't know, it's the mastering definitely scares me. I think I'll probably do the mastering. Like, we'll probably end up doing it ourselves because so far I'm happy with what it sounds like. But then, like, our whole thing this year is, like, we want to find a label.
Yeah.
So we're going to do, like, the first run of CDs ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and then try to find a label along the way. Label gets behind us. Then we'll do a remaster
Totally.
and put out the CDs again that way once we
Yeah.
have more money to be able to do it with.
Completely, yeah.
So plus it's kind of cool. Like if you if we like the first however many CDs, like, oh, we have the first master. You know what I mean?
Totally,
So
you have
that'd
like
be
the
super
first,
fun.
the first
The first
pass.
go at. Yeah, exactly. And that's the cool thing about like keeping all the master files and things like that. Is that we have the ability to go in and be like,
Do that
hey,
later on,
let's
or
do that.
do-
We can,
yeah.
if we want to, we can put money into remastering these a different way.
Yeah, totally.
So, which is definitely one of those things that helps me sleep at night. Like, I mean, I'm
Knowing
happy
that
with
you,
them,
it's not like it's
but-
not final. Yeah, totally.
that's not to say that I'm not happy with them.
Yeah.
I am, but the idea of that it can always be better
Yeah, yeah.
makes me always feel better.
I always
about
think about that too. Like I always think like does Paul McCartney like think about like the like the Rubber Soul album, and
hate
he's
the way
like
they
man, I
guitar on
just
this."
wish that like I had like this idea on this song
Yeah.
or this instrument, like I had this instrument or this thing at that time. Probably not because they had
Yeah.
everything, but and everything was better back then. But I was
Yeah,
like,
right.
but I always think about that. I'm like, I wonder if like one of them like, man, I just wish that I did this idea, I sang this line instead, or I did this chord thing, or
Yeah.
you know.
And I also love the way that I like albums that, because here's the other thing that as artists, I feel like I don't think I'm not an artist, but like as musicians or creators, one of the things that I definitely don't think about that often. I don't know about you, but I don't think about like when I hear an album, especially early albums, I'm always hearing mistakes, but I'm almost never clocking them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm almost never hearing them when they're happening.
Yeah.
Whereas creators, that's all we hear.
Yeah, totally.
So like one of my favorite bands of all time is Alkaline Trio,
Uh-huh.
and their first album, God Damn It, is littered with mistakes. And,
Yeah.
and
And you would never know, or like,
the thing is, I didn't.
you
I heard
appreciate their
them.
mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I heard them, but I didn't know that they were mistakes.
Yeah.
I just thought they were like these cool things they did on purpose.
Totally.
And then like the primary being, they recorded the backup vocals before they did the lead vocals because Dan,
crazy.
the bassist
Yeah.
who did all the backing stuff and leads on a couple songs, had to leave to go on tour with his other band at the time.
Yeah.
So he didn't have time to come in after they were scheduled.
Yeah.
So there's that whole album has the weirdest melody, like harmonies back and forth. Like they're in, like the notes are right.
Yeah.
But the rhythms are all really different. And I
Yeah.
always thought that was like, I never really thought about it, or I thought that was just how they did it. And then I found that out later on, and I was like, oh my God, that would eat me up inside. Like,
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes that's it. Like the imperfections shine through, and they're
Yeah.
like, that's what separates like some of the albums from just something that's like sterile. You know what I mean? Like you don't want a sterile album
No.
either.
I wanna
We're
be
kind
able
of
to
on the
know.
fence right now because we're trying to think about where to record. We have one of the options is a studio that is going to do it's a professional studio. It's going to do a really fantastic job. We recorded previously with Jay Paz, who was awesome. He's been a friend of mine and my wife's for a long time, and he really did a great job on the first album. I really loved it.
Yeah, he did the Apaches album.
Yeah.
That's why I knew the name from something.
Yeah, he's amazing, and we're like, should we do that again? Like, we're just back and forth constantly. We're like, yeah, I don't know, like, should we do like the home recording and have that garage rock sound, or should we try to like have like a really clean? And I just keep on steering back to I don't think anybody listens to garage rock for like symphonic quality. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's one advantage of that. Like if you're in a prog band or something, you want like the most like tight, like you have multiple members and you want it to be like really tight and perfect, and every drum like every kick hit like has to be on like perfect. I don't necessarily feel like Apaches has to be like that.
I don't feel like really anybody does. Like I don't like that.
It makes sense for like Yes and Rush or like you know what I mean, like that like, and any band that's trying to do something similar to that. I get that. Like it's like, you know, it's symphonic. It's like, you know, rehearsed like and that's the thing about surf rock too, which is really cool, is that it has to be tight, like, you know, because that's what's being surf is. It's like stopping on like the dime and like being really tight, like a lot of punk music. But it has to be loose at the same time. Exactly. It has to be cool and loose, and like you're hanging out. Like otherwise, it's stuffy and weird, and nobody buys it. You know? Yeah.
No. There's been albums that I've listened to before that just sound like the musical equivalent to airbrushed CGI.
Yeah.
It does not make sense.
That's a really good analogy.
But that's how I feel about like. And they're not bands I listen to for that reason, amongst many reasons. But there's like Disturbed. Yeah. I remember hearing out of curiosity some of like the last couple Disturbed albums, and just thinking to myself, did a single human do anything to this at all? There's not an inch of humanity in this entire album. I can't tell if it's a drum machine or if it's a real drum set. I feel like it is a drum machine, but I don't know. And there's that stuff just drives me. Come here. That my dog is crazy. That stuff drives me absolutely crazy. I can't stand when there's no humanity, when everything is just like copy pasted drums, and it drives me nuts. I like hearing the imperfections, but it's not just about hearing the imperfections. You can hear the humanity, and you can hear the people playing. Yeah, it doesn't sound.
And at the same time, I love Steely Dan. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm like all over the map with that stuff where I'm like, I see it where it's like studio perfection and absolute sound quality is really good in a certain situation, and it's really bad to have that if you're like Lead Belly, you know?
Yes, of
you
course.
Don't. It's like you want the opposite. Like you want it. Like it wouldn't be the same if it was that. So
yeah, and But I'm such a purist in so many ways. Like that's why I was never into CGI movies that much.
Yeah, me neither.
The only films that I really
it loses the art aspect of it.
It does, in my opinion, unless it uses CGI as an art of its own. And by that I don't mean huge blockbuster superhero movies.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure. And then that's
like
not
you're watching just CGI for like
exactly like the new Alice in Wonderland movie and the last Alice in Wonderland movie. Fucking anything Tim Burton's done in the last decade.
Yeah, totally.
I just look at.
I totally agree with you.
What's the point? I don't understand why are you doing this now?
But sometimes it's used to just like enhance colors or something, and it works really well.
Yeah,
perfect example.
Most of that is live action stuff, and I'm obsessed with.
They shouldn't substitute. The way the rule of thumb should be is that they shouldn't substitute something they could do with practical effects with CGI.
Yeah.
And that's a simple rule, but they can't do that. And the new Indiana Jones sucked for that reason too.
Yeah. And so the new Mad Max was very much like it's just they used it to enhance or add. They didn't use it to be the forefront. But then there's movies that are all CGI but are so artistic about it. And my ultimate example of that is Sin City.
Yeah, totally.
Sin City is one of those movies. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, but I'm a person who by law I do not like CGI. But that movie is so beautiful.
It worked for that one,
it's
for sure.
Artistic, and it's original.
It looks like a comic book. It's probably the closest one to that.
Yeah, that and Watchmen I think are two movies that are very comic book related. But Sin City even more because it's all like that, like black and white and red.
Creepshow is like before CGI, where it has like this like the way they use the lights and stuff like that, like really make it very pulpy and comic booky.
See, that's the thing about CGI too is when you watch old movies that first used CGI, it has a extremely specific look.
Yeah.
By that, Dead Alive or
of course. I know.
The CGI in that movie is so specific.
Yeah.
And a lot of movies of that time looked that way.
Yeah, totally. It becomes like a thing. Like you can date it according to CGI.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it got a little better over time, and then there was people like James Cameron who were able to kind of make it work and stand the test of time. Like I feel like movies like T2 really stand the test of time.
It won't. Yeah, that doesn't look bad now.
No,
yeah,
it doesn't. But
and then there's other ones
then.
where like I feel like here's the difference. I think that sometimes when they do CGI, they're trying to make it realistic enough and tell you have to try to believe, like you have to believe that this is real.
Yes.
Whereas like if you watch Clash of the Titans, like Harryhausen's like not asking you to believe that it's real.
Yeah.
He's asking you to suspend belief.
Yeah.
And you're like invited to do that, and you do that.
Exactly.
Like you're like, I know that this is like claymation. Looks freaking sick though.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
There has to be that window, and there has to be that difference. I really, really like. Yeah, you're right. I like when movies ask you to suspend disbelief.
Yeah.
Like and for some reason the movie Rubber just popped into my head.
Oh, that movie's
like,
so weird.
the opening is literally a guy just being like, there is no fucking reason that this movie should exist.
Yeah.
And none of this makes sense.
And it's totally true. Yeah.
And like everything that filmmaker does is like that. Like I don't know if you've seen Wrong or Wrong Cops.
I haven't.
Or any of the other thing, and I can't remember his name. He's this French Canadian. I think he's French Canadian or French, or I think he's French Canadian.
Makes sense.
And he does all the soundtracks to his movies. The soundtracks are real cool, like the real like synth stuff.
Yeah.
And none of his movies make sense. They're not all as batshit as Rubber.
Yeah.
But they are as batshit as Rubber, but they are in different ways. They're a little bit more subtle in their weirdness, whereas Rubber is straight up on Front Street. This is a ridiculous movie. Whereas the other movies are stuff like a guy is working in an office, but it's always raining inside the office, and no one seems to notice or care. It's real artsy fartsy weird stuff like that doesn't really make sense. But yeah, I love stuff like that. Like I guess they call it like surrealism or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
But Rubber isn't. Rubber is just ridiculous. That movie everyone talked about it, and all my friends and people on the internet were talking about how ridiculous this one. It's one of those movies that got famous because of the internet, because people are always talking about this ridiculous movie that Magnet put out. It was one of our favorite companies
That's
ever.
like that totally. I'm like subscribed to them on Facebook and everything because I just love them. There's like a new like horror film anthology called XX or something.
Okay.
Have you heard about that one?
No.
Looks pretty interesting. This is St. Vincent's doing like a
sweet,
like a directorial debut for it or whatever. But they just consistently put out, like, John dies at the end.
Yes, John dies at the end.
Oh my gosh, that movie's incredible.
I still have my ticket stub from going to see. Did you ever go to the Royale Theater in Mesa?
I did not. No,
do you know
I
have
should
you heard
have.
of it?
No, I don't.
Okay, so it was only around for a year.
Okay.
Because they just played movies from Blu-rays onto a fucking screen and didn't tell anybody.
That not okay. Yeah, totally.
So
very okay with me though.
Yeah, no, I loved it. Totally. I didn't know that though until it was on. Do you know where Asylum Records is now on Main Street, like right next to Gotham City Comics and Milano's?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, that's where it was. It was in the exact same spot where Asylum is now.
Yeah.
And I went there to see Hobo with a Shotgun.
Okay.
And I still have my ticket stub. Like it was awesome. And I loved that place, and it was run by Madcap.
I'm upset that I remember Madcap Theater because they had they did a Harkins that they took over that Harkins briefly on Mill Avenue.
Yeah.
And I saw Birdemic there in the room.
Nice.
Yeah,
dude,
totally.
Dude, like the room is like, oh my god, I have it.
And
on
I got
DVD.
to meet the director. Not Tommy Wiseau. I got to meet the director of Birdemic, and that was.
The Room is one of those movies where I still have it to pick a date where I'm gonna get all my friends together, and we're all, because I've talked about it to all my friends.
Yeah, totally. I got to be a part of that.
But for sure. I've been talking about it forever, but I'm just sitting here like we cannot watch The Room until we are all together.
Yeah.
Because this movie is a religious experience.
Totally it is.
But so Madcap, the same person, this really cool New Zealand girl who like ran Madcap, ran the Royale.
I remember her.
Yeah.
It was like Midnight Mamacita.
Yeah,
was
exactly.
her like
yeah.
I remember her.
So she ran the Royale.
Yeah.
And the Royale was cool because you'd come in and there was a TV. And it was always playing some kind of weird VHS video nasty. And there's a bunch of VHSs behind it. And you'd go in through this curtain, and there was this tiny little theater there. And I went in there like right in the beginning because they were playing Hobo with a Shotgun. And I was like, by that title alone, I've got to be there.
Totally.
I got my parents to drop me off because I was like 17 when that happened. When that theater opened, and I saw fucking Zombie there, or like Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. The Lucio Fulci.
Yeah, Lucio Fulci. Yeah. So I saw Zombie
that.
there. I saw Hobo with a Shotgun there. I saw Human Centipede 1 and 2 there.
The great eye.
Yeah, the great eye scene. Yeah.
Oh man.
I saw that. I saw Grave Encounters, like a bunch of amazing movies in that theater. It was home. Like that place was home to me. But one time I went there to see Freaks, the Todd Browning.
I never saw it, but I know what it is.
I love it.
Yeah,
It's so good, so good. So I went. It was on my birthday. It was like 2 p.m. They were playing on my birthday. It was like me and one other schmuck in there, like by ourselves, right? It's just like no one was there.
Yeah.
It was, so we were sitting there, and the movie started, and I was all excited. And it didn't ever occur to me, like, how did they get reels for this? Like, how are they playing?
Yeah.
So and then like a quarter way through the movie. The film stops and it goes to a main menu.
No way.
Yeah.
And you're like, I figured it out.
And I was like, no fucking way this whole time.
Yeah.
And then so the guy hits play, and the FBI warning.
There it is. That tells you
to do it. It comes up, and you hear this guy from the projection booth just go, "Ignore that." I was like, yeah. That place was the best. And then I remember getting like on Facebook like a year after I was into it, like, we're not going to be able to renew for second year or whatever.
That's
and
such
I was
a
like,
bummer.
I wonder why. Like, but I was so stoked on that place, and they would sell candy cigarettes too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was such a really cool spot.
I remember going to it when it was like when she briefly owned that thing, and I was like, man, this place is awesome. It just felt so grassroots.
Yeah,
like
it
felt
was
like
so cool.
you were definitely a part of something that not a lot of people knew about.
And I remember I asked her once, I was like, because I love Cannibal Holocaust because I'm a weirdo. I love
of course.
that movie.
Yeah.
And I asked her once, I was like, would you ever play Cannibal Holocaust? Because that would get an insane crowd. Like, you would totally sell that out. And she's like, yeah, I would sell it out, and it would be great, and sure, people would come, but I just can't. I'm not into that movie because of the animal stuff. And I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I know, I get that, because you seem really
like
nice.
all of those laws came about because of that movie.
I know.
Yeah.
And I always tell people about that movie and about how like he had to recreate the props in court to prove.
So
that
was
people.
that was the whole thing, right? Like, so he made the actors all sign this thing that said you were going underground for the next like year after this film, so that people think that this is real. It's kind of like a Blair Witch thing. And then he got taken to trial, and then he was like, he was like asking them like, no, like, come back. And they're like, nah, I got this thing that you signed that says I'm not supposed to.
I know.
Like, come out. And like, he's like, no, you need to come out. Like,
I'm gonna
they
get
think I
arrested.
killed you. Yeah.
I think that's hilarious. Like,
it's such a great piece of history.
I love that movie.
Film,
I love that movie. I discovered that because of and I wish I could have been around before, back when people were like trading video nasty VHSs and bootlegs, but I wasn't, which sucks. Like, I found about Cannibal Holocaust because I saw Eli Roth wearing it on a t-shirt in an interview, and I was like, what is that? And him talking about it, and that's the same way I found out about Sleepaway Camp. Like, Eli Roth was like my vehicle to finding out about a bunch of cool shit because he's such a fanboy. That's how I found out about Cannibal Holocaust and a bunch of other stuff. But I wish I could have been around, like, because when he was a kid, he talks about when he was a kid, he would like trade like Faces of Death with people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It sounds so cool. Like, I would have loved to have been around for that kind of shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was like when I was a kid. That was like right around that time. I didn't get into that too much, but because I was still watching, like, go to the store and watch, like, grab like horror films. Like, I was always into horror. I had to watch them with my older sister, and you get like all like Sleepaway Camp and stuff like that. Like, and then when I was in college, I actually started a horror club called the Boils and Ghouls Club of America.
That's cool.
and it was like we did the same thing. We just played movies on like a projector in the room, and then like I think we did Texas Chainsaw Massacre one year, and the girls were getting up and like throwing up in the bathrooms and stuff like that. Yeah, totally. Really? Yeah, and they're like, that movie's so disturbing, and it's so weird about that. Like, there's like very little blood in that film.
I don't get why that.
It's all cerebral, you know.
I love it. I mean,
every frame looks like someone's last known photograph. You know, like, so like, you know, it's one of those films that I really have appreciation for. Like, definitely goes on the top 5.
I know. Yeah, I love Texas Chainsaw, and I love the second one with fucking Jesus Christ. I almost said Dustin Hoffman. Why did I almost say Dustin?
Oh, you're thinking
with
jeez, why am I
the guy from Speed?
Yeah, totally. Dennis Hopper.
Yeah. Dennis Hopper. I love that one, and I even like the new generation. I don't like Leatherface. At all.
I didn't see that one. I saw the one that was kind of like the remake, and that one actually was pretty good.
Which one was the newer one?
The one with like that gunshot scene where like it goes through the ladies in the van or whatever in the beginning.
Oh fuck yeah, the remake, dumb and idiot, the 2003
that
Platinum
one was
Dunes
pretty good. Yeah,
it was amazing.
Yeah, and it goes totally under the radar as like, you know, kind of a successful remake.
So good, like Platinum Dunes. It's I don't like Michael Bay at all.
Yeah, me neither. He's
one
a piece of shit.
One of those people. I can't stand him. I can't stand any of the movies that he makes. But he was the guy behind Platinum Dunes, which is who like remade, like, is in the mid early to mid, I guess all throughout like the 2000s.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of horror movie remakes, and I loved all of them because that was when I was starting to get into horror film.
Yeah.
Like for real was in the early 2000s because fucking when I was in 2003 when Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake came out that he did with Arlie Ermy and all those guys, and I was in third grade, so I was just starting to discover that kind of stuff, and I remember like hearing the word Texas Chainsaw Massacre and having this visceral like that sounds really intense.
Totally.
So. When I remember seeing that and just being blown away, like it was so good. So maybe I'm partial to it for that because that's when I started to get into them. But that they also did the Hills Have Eyes remake, which was badass.
That was a good one too.
And the Friday the 13th
I didn't realize
one,
that those were all connected. Like that
so Friday the 13th one in 2009.
Yeah.
Hills Have Eyes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Nightmare on Elm Street one, which I didn't really like that much. There's a couple more that I'm forgetting too. But all of the big horror titles that they redid. Were all like the same company, and Michael Bay was behind that company, which was like the coolest thing he ever did.
Totally.
Those movies, but I loved them.
Especially at the time because there was nothing like that. Like everything was just like a campy horror movie, or it wasn't actually creepy.
And Eli Roth had a lot to do with that too, because when he made Cabin Fever, everyone was like, R-rated horror isn't gonna sell. Stop! Don't make R-rated horror. Like we want our rings. And I don't remember if the ring was rated R or not, but they wanted the urban legend.
Totally.
And all of like
the teenager
I know we did
horror.
last summer. They wanted all the teenager horror.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, fuck you. I can totally make this work. And Cabin Fever came out, and it just blew everything away. And everyone was like, okay, R-rated horror movies can sell. And that's when Platinum Dunes started pulling all that shit.
Totally. And like now we're so lucky because we have this that whole collective of like Ty West and
What's your opinion on Ty West?
I love Ty West, but the thing is that I feel like I'm kind of uncertain what's going on now because it's kind of like I have The Roost, which I love. That's his first film, like professional film, and I love it. And then House of the Devil, absolute fame, like one of my favorite top like horror movies, and it had such a refreshing feel to it where it's like, oh my God, like horror is not dumb anymore. You know what I mean? It's not just gore and torture porn. So it's like,
I love that too, though.
And then what wound up happening is that I kind of like, I don't know, like I know he's doing a Western now, and he had the ghost one or whatever. Innkeepers, which was okay. I just felt like, that one is kind of like, the jury's still out on that one for me.
Okay, see, then that's where I really wanted to talk about because Ty West always fucks me at the end of his movies.
Yeah.
I don't know if he has a single ending that I walk away with being like, that was a good ending.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Almost always, except for and this is the controversial. I love Cabin Fever 2.
Okay.
I love.
And that was was kind of like his that was his movie that he was like, I don't want my name on this.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. So Cabin Fever 2 was the first movie of his I ever saw.
Yeah.
And I got it from the library, and I was like, I'm not gonna like. I just got a bunch of stack of movies,
yeah.
and I was just like, that was back. I didn't have a job. I was like 16.
Yeah.
I was just blowing through movies every single night. And I had another marathon where I was just going through movies, and Cabin Fever 2 was the bottom of the list. It was the last movie of the night.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know I'm going to be disappointed, but I'm so curious because I'm such a giant Cabin Fever fan.
Yeah.
And I love that movie. It's fun. It's funny. I like the way it's shot. I think the lighting is really interesting. I think the shots are interesting. I think the character's hilarious. I just had a great time. I thought that movie was really fun.
Right.
And then I saw House of the Devil, I saw The Innkeepers, and I saw his involvement with VHS, which I thought was cool too. I didn't see the Sacrament
VHS was great. His like involvement in ABCs of Death was just garbage.
I still haven't seen ABCs of Death. I keep hearing that, so I haven't watched it yet.
VHS though, VHS and VHS 2, like the VHS 2, that's like the middle segment is like mind blowing with the cult.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. The cult's my favorite one.
It just kills. I think like overall like one's better, but then like that middle segment beats like all of the other.
Yes.
Like I can't wait to see more from that group that did the last segment, the first one of the first
Radio Silence.
Yeah, Silence.
Yeah.
Those guys have to do
awesome.
more stuff.
I know.
You know?
Well, Adam Wingard is
and he's doing
blowing
great
up right
yeah,
now. Yeah,
and he's fantastic.
He is so good.
What did I watch?
But
recently
again,
of
You're
his that I
Next.
was like, man, he's just incredible.
Your Next was
Your
like
Next
his
was
big
fantastic.
movies. I didn't like. I
did
had
The
a problem
Guest,
with the
too.
ending of that.
Right?
I haven't seen The Guest yet.
The
but it's
Guest
on
is
my
awesome.
list.
Yeah.
But Your Next was another movie where throughout the whole thing, I was like, oh my God, Adam Wingard is amazing. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when he shows you, because I was freaked, the scary, and I don't really get scared by horror movies anymore because
Yeah.
I'm really just like desensitized now.
Yeah.
But I can recognize like what is scary and what is thrilling, obviously.
Yeah.
But at the end, when they reveal, in the fucking spoilers, when they reveal that these are all people that they know, these are people who we've seen before, these are people who are doing it for money.
Yeah.
I was totally pulled out.
Totally.
Because I liked like the Strangers kind
Yeah.
of vibe, where you didn't know who these people were. That's what made them scary. That
That's
they're just,
right.
They're just inherent evil. Same way with Michael Myers.
Yeah.
When like Rob Zombie made Michael Myers a person, it
Yeah,
took away from.
I think that's what makes The Strangers such a impactful film is that it doesn't give you any
Yeah.
bit of hope or like anything that grasp onto. You're just like, there's just home invasion, people
Yeah.
get killed, and it's really weird.
Yeah.
And that's a sad thing that happens to like 0.0001 of the population or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
I know, right?
But it's like it's a it's still like and that's what makes it impactful. And I agree with you 100% about that. You know.
Yeah, I love it. I think the unknown is really scary, and when you make it like, oh, they're just doing it for money.
It's the same thing with
what?
like every Steven King movie. At the
Yeah.
end, it gets supernatural, and
Yeah,
maybe it gets
that's
supernatural.
true.
I like get pulled out, and I go like, I don't know.
Did you
like,
see
they
the
could have just
Babadook?
made it a normal person, and it would creep me out more.
Did you see the Babadook?
I did, yeah.
That was another movie where at the end they made it like.
And sometimes they try to get too complex with horror movies. They're like, you know
Yeah.
what? We don't want to just be a horror movie. Like all of a sudden they want to be like highly literate or like
Yeah.
have like all these complex like levels. You're like, it doesn't need that.
Yeah.
It's better when it's something really base.
Yeah,
you know?
I
You're talking about like base brain type stuff
I
going
know.
on. Just keep
You're
it that
literally
way.
mixing the two extreme human emotions. You're mixing sex and fear.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like, it's
Just
not-
do
it's-
that, yeah.
And like, but like with the Babadook was another one where I still liked it after the end because I thought it was a great movie still, and I thought it was thrilling and cool. But like, I think second viewing, I was just like, this is so unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like, it was cool because you don't know if she's crazy or not, and that's why it's so thrilling. So if you give us at the end that like that it's probably real, then it's just like, ugh. But I mean, the scariest part of that movie was the idea of having a child like that. And right there, I lose the audio. Like, I don't know what happened. I'm sitting here editing, and I'm looking through everything, and it's gone. So, I mean, luckily, like, right after that sentence, we took a little bit of a break, and then we immediately wrapped it up after that and went our separate ways, but... there's no cohesive ending! What the fuck? It's like a foreign film. It just abruptly ends, and you're just like, oh, I guess that's the end of the movie. Okay, bye. The end. Sorry. Fuck.